Evelyn noticed the red door first. It was on a house at the very end of Ash Mill Lane, a narrow, dead-end street tucked into a quiet pocket of the village. The house sat slightly apart from the rest, as if it had been there before the cul-de-sac ever existed. The property was unkempt, overgrown with ivy and dead rose bushes, and surrounded by a fence of rusting black iron. But what stood out most was the door. Painted a dull, matte crimson, it didn't shine or shimmer. It didn't look new or even recently repainted. It looked like it had always been that color, as if the wood itself had bled red over time. When she pointed it out during their first walk through the neighborhood, Mark barely glanced up. "Weird color," he said, "but I guess that's what gives the village character." The village was called Elderbrook, population just under 600, the kind of place with cobblestone lanes, a single post office, a tea room with uneven chairs, and neighbors who all knew each other's dogs' names. Mark and Evelyn had moved there a week ago, leaving behind the sprawl of London for something quieter, slower, supposedly good for the nerves, the kind of place where nothing ever happened. They had bought a small 2-bedroom cottage just off the main square, sloped roof, old chimney, walls thick enough to block even the strongest winds. It felt like something out of a storybook, until the red door. The locals were kind in that surface level sort of way. Warm smiles, handshakes, pies left at the door. There was Mrs. Calloway, who lived across from them and wore the same blue cardigan every day. She had been the first to greet them. "If you need anything, just knock, unless it's Wednesday. I don't talk to people on Wednesdays." Then there was Mr. Fletcher, the retired builder who spent his days oiling the same old lawnmower that never moved. He spoke in phrases like "suppose it'll rain" and "seen worse things on better days." They met Claire and Joseph, a couple about their age, at the tea room. Claire had sharp eyes and always asked questions that weren't quite polite. "So, you moved here from the city. Strange time for it, isn't it?" Everyone was friendly, but there was a tightness beneath it, like laughter that came a second too late, like conversations that stopped when you walked past. It was only on the third evening, over a shared bottle of wine, that Evelyn brought it up again. "I asked Mrs. Calloway about the house at the end of Ash Mill." Mark looked up. "The red door?" "Yeah." She went quiet, then said, "Oh, that old place? Been like that since I was a girl." Like she was quoting something rehearsed. She didn't say anything else. Number changed the subject to fig jam. Mark frowned. "Maybe they think we're being nosy." "Maybe," Evelyn said, "but it's like they're all pretending it's just normal." The next morning, they passed it again on their walk. No number on the mailbox, no car in the drive. The windows were dark, though not boarded. The garden was a mess of brambles and broken stone paths, but the door, it was flawless, not a crack in the wood, not a smudge on the paint. Mark hesitated. "It's weird." Evelyn nodded. "And no one thinks it's weird. That's what makes it worse." They stood in silence a moment before someone called out from down the street, "Lovely day for a walk." It was Mr. Fletcher, waving his oil rag from behind the hedge. Mark called back, "Hey, quick question. What's with that red-doored house?" Mr. Fletcher's arm dropped. His face froze for just a moment. Then he smiled again. "It's always been there," he said simply. "Always been red." Then he turned and walked back into his shed. It started with Evelyn keeping a journal, not for herself, she wasn't the type, but for the house, for the door. A place to log when the curtains shifted, when the lights behind the dusty windows flickered, when the ivy along the fence crept a little higher than the day before. She never saw anyone enter or leave the house, but things changed, slightly, subtly, the kind of shifts you don't notice unless you're looking too closely. Mark didn't share her obsession, not yet, but even he had begun to slow down when they passed the red door. Sometimes they stopped altogether, just standing there in the middle of the lane, watching. "Someone's living there," Evelyn said one morning. "I swear I saw a candle in the upstairs window." Mark didn't respond right away. He had his arms crossed, eyes fixed on the second floor. "Maybe. That's the third time this week something's moved inside." "Then go knock," he said, almost teasing. Evelyn turned sharply. "Would you?" "No," he admitted, "because this place, this village, they all act like it's just part of the scenery. That's what makes it worse." They stood in silence for a while. Then Evelyn wrote something in her journal. "Thursday, 7:16 a.m. Light in upper window, no one visible, door unchanged." Later that week, they were browsing books at the village's second-hand shop, the Dusty Spine, when an older woman behind the counter gave Evelyn a long, uneasy stare. "You've been looking at number 9, she said flatly. Mark turned. "Sorry?" "The red door," she clarified. "You've been watching it?" Evelyn nodded. "Yes, what's the story with it?" The woman shook her head, slow and firm. "You don't ask about that house." "Why not?" "Because if you ask too long, you'll end up going inside. And if you go inside—" She trailed off, folding her hands. "You don't come back." They laughed about it later over coffee, but something in the woman's voice stuck with them. Mark tried to brush it off. "It's village folklore. People love a mystery." "Then why does no one ever go near it?" He didn't have an answer. That night, Evelyn dreamed she stood in front of the red door, and someone inside was whispering her name. Not loud, not demanding, just steady, repeating, familiar. She didn't tell Mark. The next few days were colder, overcast, the kind of damp air that made everything feel heavier. Evelyn walked past number 9 alone on Saturday morning and noticed something new. The fence gate was open, just slightly, a few inches, enough to make her stop mid-step. She didn't go in, but she didn't walk away either. She stared, and in the dirt just inside the gate, there was a single footprint, not hers, not Mark's. Someone had been there. Mark tried to forget it. He went for longer runs, spent more time fixing little things around their cottage. But the image stayed with him, the footprint, the cracked path, the red paint. By the time Sunday came, it was Evelyn who asked what they'd both been thinking. "Do you want to go in?" He hesitated. She continued. "We don't have to. I can't stop thinking about it." "Neither can I," Mark said. "But if we go through that door—" "We don't have to go far, just inside, just to see." They waited until dusk. The village quieted down after 5. No one lingered on the streets. Windows glowed softly with lamplight. Elder Brook turned inward. Number 9, however, remained unchanged. They stood at the gate, neither moving. Evelyn reached for Mark's hand. "Ready?" "No," he said honestly, "but let's do it anyway." The gate creaked as they stepped inside. They walked the path slowly, boots crunching against scattered leaves and old stones. At the door, Evelyn reached out. It opened with a soft push, no lock, no resistance, just darkness inside. She looked at him. "We go in together." And they did. The door closed behind them with a sound that echoed far too long for such a small space. The interior was darker than it should have been. No furniture, no smell of dust or mildew, just silence, and the kind of blackness that felt thick, heavy. Mark reached for his phone and flicked on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, revealing warped floorboards and peeling wallpaper. The hallway stretched deeper than the exterior of the house would suggest. There were doors, 4 of them, evenly spaced, each painted the same red as the one they had come through. "I don't like this," Evelyn whispered. Mark turned, trying to keep his voice steady. We're just gonna look around. A few minutes, then we go. But the deeper they stepped into the house, the heavier the air became. There was no creaking under their feet, no wind outside, no sound at all. It felt like the world had been paused. Evelyn stopped first. "Do you feel that?" she asked. "What?" "Like we're not supposed to be here." Mark opened one of the side doors. Nothing inside, just a small room with a broken chair and cracked tiles on the floor. No windows, no outlets. He closed it again. "Let's go," he said. This isn't just an old house." They turned and moved quickly back to the front door. Mark grabbed the handle and pulled. The door opened without resistance, but the light outside was wrong. Too bright, too flat, like sunlight filtered through a sheet of wax paper. They stepped out onto the front path. The air was cooler than it had been. Damp, still. Elderbrook was there, but it wasn't. The street was the same shape. The buildings were the same, but the colors were different. Muted, slightly faded. And then they saw the people. A man in a wool coat strolled by walking a dog neither of them had seen before. A woman across the street hung linens they didn't recognize on a line they'd never noticed. Children rode past on strange, vintage-looking bicycles. No one looked at them. Evelyn turned to Mark. "Something's wrong." Mark looked past her, down the street toward their cottage. Except someone else was there. They sprinted down the lane. When they reached the house that should have been theirs, Evelyn stopped cold. There was a red bicycle leaning against the wall. The curtains were yellow instead of blue. The garden gnome that Mark had cracked by accident 2 days ago was gone. And through the window, they saw them, a couple, sitting at their kitchen table, laughing. The man was older than Mark, with a full beard and glasses. The woman had long blonde hair and was pouring tea. Mark stepped forward and knocked hard on the door. The laughter inside stopped. A moment later, the door opened. "Yes?" the man asked, frowning. Mark stared. I think this is our house." "I'm sorry?" "We live here," Evelyn said. "This is our cottage. We moved in last week." The man and woman exchanged a glance. The woman stepped forward. "We've lived here for 9 years." Mark turned to Evelyn. "This isn't right. Something's happened." The woman's smile faded. "Are you feeling okay? Do you need help?" Mark stepped back. "Number, I think we've made a mistake." They walked away quickly down the path, trying to keep their breathing steady. When they reached the edge of the lane, Evelyn grabbed his arm. "What do we do?" Mark looked back toward number 9. The red door stood closed exactly as it had before. "I don't think we came out the same way we went in," he said quietly. Evelyn's face went pale. They stood in the middle of the street, the wrong world moving around them. The village almost, but not quite, the same. Evelyn didn't speak for the first few minutes as they walked. Her eyes scanned the buildings. Same shapes, same names on the shops, but the details were wrong. "Look," she whispered, stopping in front of the bakery. The sign read, "Bridget's Loaf," in the same swirled lettering they remembered, but the color had changed, blue instead of green, and there was a bell above the door that hadn't been there before. Inside, the woman behind the counter wasn't Bridget. She was younger, maybe 30, with jet black hair and a heavy coat despite the warmth. They kept walking. Everything was familiar, and nothing was. They passed a garden that Evelyn remembered walking through just 2 days ago, but now it was fenced off, overgrown with weeds, and the plaque that once read, Elderbrook Memorial, now said, "In memory of the Ash Mill Fire, 1954. "We're not just in the past," she whispered, "or the future." Mark stopped. "What are you saying?" "We're in a version of the village, one that's like ours, but it's not. It never was." They turned corners, retraced steps, hoping for some landmark, any clue that might anchor them. But every familiar place was off by just enough to make their stomachs turn. The air smelled different, older, like books in a closed attic. Even the people, they walked slower, said less, and no one seemed to recognize them. When they passed their supposed house again, Mark paused and stared at the couple through the window. "I watched him butter toast this morning," he said. "I sat in that exact chair. Now he's there, like I never existed." Evelyn's voice shook. "Do you think we're dead?" "No," Mark said. "I think we're lost." They found their way back to number 9 just as dusk started to fall. It looked the same. Red door closed, path still cracked, ivy creeping upward. Mark hesitated. "Do we go back in?" Evelyn didn't answer. He stepped forward, reached for the handle. Locked. He turned it again. Nothing. "We left it open," Evelyn said. "It wasn't locked." Mark knocked, more out of desperation than reason. Nothing. He knocked again. Still nothing. That night, they slept in the woods beyond the village, using their jackets as makeshift blankets. It was cold, but neither of them complained. They didn't speak much at all. The forest felt less foreign than the town. In the morning, they tried to speak to someone, anyone, but every conversation felt like trying to punch through fog. People were polite but distant, vague, disconnected. Evelyn begged the librarian to help them find records of number 9. The woman smiled. "That house doesn't exist anymore. Burned down in the 60s. Why do you ask?" Evelyn stared at her. "It's still standing." But the librarian had already turned away. Back at number 9, the red door remained shut. On the 3rd day, something changed. They found a note on their former cottage's doorstep. It wasn't handwritten. It was typed, perfectly center. "Do not try again. The door remembers." Mark folded it slowly. "What does that mean?" Evelyn didn't answer. She was staring down the lane, toward the house, her face pale. "Mark," she said, "do you hear that?" He strained to listen. Faint, barely a whisper, but it was there, his name, repeating from behind the red door. The door opened on the morning of the 3rd day. Mark and Evelyn had returned to number 9 every few hours, hoping, waiting, whispering to each other that maybe, just maybe, it had all been a mistake, that the house would let them back in, that they could undo whatever had happened. This time, as they stood before the door, Mark reached out on instinct. It opened. The hinges creaked like they hadn't moved in years, and the scent of aged wood and cold air spilled out. They exchanged a glance, then stepped inside. The house was brighter than before. Still old, still strange, but lit now by warm amber lamps lining the hallway. The wallpaper, once peeling, had shifted slightly, repaired, repapered in parts. The strange hallway with its 4 red doors was still there, but something about the air felt watched. Then came the voice. "You took your time." They spun around. A woman stood at the base of the stairs, mid-60s, perhaps older, with gray hair tied back into a tight bun and a deep green apron. Her posture was stiff, her voice sharp and clipped. "Who are you?" Evelyn asked. "I'm the housekeeper," she replied, "though I prefer keeper of the threshold. Less domestic." Mark stepped forward. "What is this place?" The woman cocked her head. "Number 9. You walked through the door. It accepted you." "Accepted?" The housekeeper smiled. "It doesn't open for everyone." Evelyn frowned. "Why couldn't we get back in?" "Because you left. And once you leave, you can't return for 3 days. That's the rule." Mark blinked. "That's oddly specific." "It's not odd," the housekeeper said. "It's protective. The house exists on the edge of things. Time, place, memory. It can't let people come and go freely. So we were locked out, Evelyn said. On purpose. Yes, and lucky you were. Most who try to force it open don't return in one piece. The house has to restabilize before you enter again. She led them into a narrow parlor that hadn't been there before. A fire burned softly in the hearth, though neither of them remembered seeing smoke outside. Evelyn sat, barely processing what she was hearing. We saw our house, but it wasn't ours. Different people lived in it. The village. It was wrong. You weren't in your village, the housekeeper said matter-of-factly. You were in a version of it, one the house took you to. Mark stared. So the house is... what? A machine? A portal? It's a door, she said. To where? That depends. On you, on your questions, on what you carry with you. We didn't ask for any of this, Evelyn said. No, the housekeeper agreed, but you were curious, and curiosity opens more than doors. She stood, brushing off her apron. You'll be able to leave again soon if you wish, but when you do, it may not be the village you remember, and you won't be able to return until the cycle resets. Mark looked at her. And how long does that take? 3 days. Always 3 days. It's not just time, it's containment. It's how the house keeps the fragments from bleeding together. Fragments of what? The housekeeper smiled again. You'll see. She turned and left the room, her footsteps fading into the floorboards like they were being swallowed. Mark and Evelyn sat in silence. The fire crackled. Somewhere a clock ticked, a slow, deliberate sound. Fragments, Evelyn whispered. How many villages are there? Mark didn't answer, because deep down he was afraid that whatever was behind that red door wasn't done showing them. Please, Evelyn said for what must have been the 3rd time that morning. There has to be a way back. Our village, our real home. There must be a way to return. The housekeeper poured tea into 3 mismatched cups and said nothing. Mark sat forward in his chair, the fire crackling beside him. You said the house takes us to different versions, that it reacts to what we carry with us. Well, we didn't carry anything. We just walked in. That's not true, the housekeeper said without looking up. You brought curiosity. That's the heaviest thing of all. They were seated in the parlor again, the same fire, the same soft ticking from the old clock on the wall. The only thing different was the silence. It had thickened somehow, pressed in closer. Evelyn clenched her fists. We need answers. You said you were the keeper. Doesn't that mean you know how this works? The housekeeper finally looked at her. I keep the house. I don't steer it. Mark frowned. So you can't help us? I can keep you safe while you're inside. I can warn you when the door is about to close. I can tell you when it will open again. But no, I cannot control where it leads. Evelyn stood. Then who can? There is no who, the housekeeper said. The house isn't a machine. It isn't a vehicle. It's a threshold. It listens and it answers. Mark stood beside Evelyn now. What are we supposed to do? Keep stepping through until we get lucky. That's one option, the housekeeper said, sipping her tea. And the other? Settle. The word hit the room like a dropped stone. Evelyn's face paled. Settle? There are those who pass through and find a version they can live with, the housekeeper said. A place close enough to their own life. Some choose to stay. Mark shook his head. That sounds like giving up. It's not giving up. It's choosing certainty over chaos. The house won't stop you from trying again, but it won't guide you either, and it won't save you if you go too far. They sat in silence again. Even the fire seemed quiet. You're telling us, Evelyn said slowly, that we could keep trying forever. The housekeeper nodded. And you might never get back. Or you might, one day, but every time you step through, you risk ending up somewhere worse. Mark looked at the old woman. Have you ever left the house? She didn't answer right away. When she did, it was barely a whisper. Once. And she stared into her teacup. I came back, but the place I knew was gone. I've been here ever since. The fire popped. A log shifted. Mark and Evelyn looked at each other. I don't want to settle in someone else's life, Evelyn said. Me neither, Mark replied, but I don't know how many more chances we'll get. They turned back to the housekeeper. When does the door open again? Mark asked. The housekeeper stood. Tomorrow, at dusk. She walked to the hallway, her voice floating behind her. The house will open where it takes you next. That's between you and it. Then she was gone. The red door creaked open just before dusk. Evelyn held Mark's hand tightly, neither of them speaking as they stepped through. They'd agreed to try again, agreed that whatever lay beyond, they would face it together. But as soon as the light shifted around them, they knew something was wrong. It was quiet, not just village quiet, dead quiet, no breeze, no birds, no distant voices. The sky above was clouded with a dull orange haze, as though the sun had gotten stuck just before setting. And the village, it was empty. The buildings were still there, but the color had drained from everything. The stone looked scorched, weathered by time and heat. The windows were black. The hedgerows that had once been trimmed with obsession were now wild and brittle, like bone-dry brambles. There were no lights in the houses, no signs of life. The air smelled of soot and something older, like an attic that had been locked for a century. It's like it's dying, Evelyn said, like we stepped into the last breath of something. Mark scanned the street. We've got 3 days. We find shelter. We wait. They headed toward their cottage, or what used to be. The house still stood, but it was sagging under its own weight. The roof line was warped, the front door hung ajar, and the walls were streaked with black, as though fire had once licked them. The garden had collapsed into itself. Flowers turned to dust, the fence swallowed by creeping vines long dead. Inside, the air was colder than outside. They moved slowly through the rooms, afraid something might crumble if they touched it. Furniture was intact, but covered in ash. The mirror in the hallway was cracked from corner to corner, and every clock in the house, kitchen, bedroom, mantel, was frozen at 3:33. Evelyn paused by one of them. It's like time stopped. Mark said nothing. He was staring out the window. That night, they slept in the back room, curled beneath layers of old blankets they'd found in a trunk. There was no sound, not even the creaking of wood or the wind. It was a silence that didn't feel peaceful. It felt like something was listening. In the morning, the sky was the same dull orange, neither brighter nor darker. Nothing had changed. It felt like the world outside had been paused mid-collapse. They walked the village, searching for anything that might make sense. They found burned-out cars with their tires melted flat, a bicycle frozen to the pavement with rust, storefronts with shattered glass and shelves emptied long ago. On the second night, Mark lit a fire in the old stove with whatever scraps he could find. It gave off little heat, but it helped ward off the dark. Evelyn sat against the wall, knees pulled to her chest. What is this place? A version, Mark said, one the house thought we needed to see. Why? He didn't answer, because he didn't know, and because deep down he feared the answer was to show them what happens if they stay too long. The third day passed slowly. No sun moved in the sky, no people appeared, no sounds returned. It was like the world had moved on and left them in its carcass. At dusk, if you could call it that, they approached number 9. The red door was open, waiting. Neither of them looked back. They stepped through, and the door closed behind them. The door opened soundlessly and warm air drifted over them. For the first time since stepping through the red door days ago, the light felt welcoming. Sunlight streamed down from a sky that was bluer than memory. The air smelled of lavender and fresh soil. Evelyn exhaled sharply. It's beautiful. They stepped out onto Ash Mill Lane. It was their street, their house, their garden trimmed exactly how they left it. The gnome with the cracked hat sat beside the rose bush. The curtains in the front window, blue, not yellow. The mailbox still crooked on its post. Mark blinked. This is it. This is home. But something was wrong. They entered their house. Everything was exactly in place. Furniture, dishes, even the sweater Evelyn had tossed over the back of the sofa that morning, at least it felt like that morning, was still there. It was perfectly their home. Too perfect. Evelyn ran her fingers along the banister, paused by the coat rack. I don't remember leaving the light on in the kitchen. I don't remember refilling the tea jar, Mark said. They walked the rooms. Everything was clean, unused, and quiet. It wasn't until they stepped outside again that the real strangeness settled in. A woman across the street was watering her plants. She looked up and smiled. Lovely weather today. Mark raised a hand. Yeah, it really is. She smiled again, same wide fixed grin, then returned to watering, repeating the same arc with her arm over and over like a loop. Two children rode past on bikes, silent, synchronized, their wheels making no sound. From the corner, Mr. Fletcher appeared, pushing his lawnmower. Slowly, precisely. Mark nudged Evelyn. He never mows this early. They stood there a moment longer. Then Evelyn said it. This place isn't real. They tried to talk to others. Mrs. Calloway offered tea, smiling blankly. Claire and Joseph appeared on a walk, speaking in cheerful monotones. When Evelyn asked what day it was, Claire blinked. It's always Sunday here. Mark felt a chill. You mean today is Sunday? No, Joseph said, still smiling. It's always Sunday. Inside again, they sat at the table in silence. I don't trust this, Mark said. It's like a replica, not the real thing. But it's so close, Evelyn whispered. What if we stayed? What if it's a trap? She didn't reply. That night, they watched the sky. The sun never moved. On the second day, Evelyn woke with a start. There was a knock at the door. Mark opened it to find 4 neighbors, Claire, Joseph, Mr. Fletcher, and the woman with the watering can, standing in a row, each holding a pie. They spoke in unison. We're glad you're home. Evelyn backed away. Mark shut the door. He checked the window. They hadn't moved. They tried leaving the house, but the street curved back into itself. Every road led home. Every shop was open but empty. Every newspaper bore the same date. Sunday. The sun never moved. On the third day, Evelyn sat motionless at the edge of the garden. Maybe it's not so bad, she said. They're kind. They're peaceful. Mark crouched beside her. It's not peace. It's sedation. He looked toward number 9 and froze. The house was gone. In its place was a row of hydrangeas, bright and blooming. No, he muttered. No, no, no. Evelyn joined him. Where is it? They've sealed it. This place, it doesn't want us to leave. They sat in the driveway until night, except night never came, and in the distance, across the unmoving sky, a second sun flickered briefly behind the clouds, too large, too low. Evelyn whispered, We have to get out. Mark took her hand. Then we find another way. And in the distance, from where number 9 used to be, the red door shimmered into view. The red door closed behind them. Mark and Evelyn stood in the narrow entryway of number 9. bathed in the low amber light that hummed faintly from the sconces on the walls. It was warmer this time, quieter. The house felt patient. They didn't speak right away. It felt like waking from a dream inside another dream. After a while, Mark sat at the foot of the stairs and buried his face in his hands. Evelyn leaned against the wall, staring at the floorboards. "I'm so tired," she whispered. Mark looked up. "Me too." They wandered into the parlor. The fire had already been lit, crackling gently like it had missed them. The same mismatched teacups were on the table, steam curling lazily from within. They hadn't touched them, but they were always full. Mark stared into the flames. "Do you remember what she said?" "The housekeeper?" Evelyn asked. "Yeah, about the house." She nodded. "It gives you what you carry with you, what you want." Mark stood, pacing slowly. "Then maybe we've been doing this wrong. Running, surviving, looking." Evelyn tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if the house isn't just some random machine throwing us through time? What if we're directing it? Subconsciously, with fear, with doubt." Evelyn walked to the far wall, pressing her palm against the wallpaper. It was warm. "I was scared when we first stepped through," she said. "I thought about losing everything, about not going home again." Mark nodded slowly. "And we didn't." They sat in silence, the firelight flickering across their faces. "Then what now?" Evelyn asked. Mark exhaled. "We stop running, we stop doubting, we start remembering." "Remembering what?" "Home, the real one. Everything about it, down to the cracks in the pavement and the tea stains on the counter." Evelyn's eyes welled. "What if we forget something? What if we imagine it wrong? Then we imagine it together, and we believe it's enough." They sat cross-legged on the floor, facing each other, and began listing details. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery on Sundays. The wind chime 2 houses down that always rang after 5 p.m. The tiny squeak in their floorboard by the front door. Mrs. Calloway's blue cardigan. The crooked mailbox. The way their kitchen window fogged in the mornings. They built their home from memory, layering pieces like bricks, speaking them into the air like they were casting a spell. They slept by the fire that night, not out of exhaustion, but out of belief. Mark woke first. The house was still. The red door stood slightly ajar. Light trickled in, natural light, not the stage sun from the last village, not the dead orange hue from the one before. Evelyn stirred. "Is it time?" Mark nodded. "Let's see what we made." They stood at the door. Evelyn reached for his hand. "Whatever happens." "We find each other," Mark said, and they stepped out. 10 years passed like a slow-breathing dream. Mark and Evelyn lived quietly, contentedly, in the same cottage they'd once fought to return to. The crooked mailbox still leaned. The wind chime still sang in the evenings. Mrs. Calloway still wore her blue cardigan. Time had softened their memories. The red door, once the heart of their fear and desperation, now stood like a relic at the end of Ash Mill Lane. Unchanged, unspoken, they had become part of the village, and like everyone else, they didn't talk about the door. It was a Tuesday when the new couple arrived. Mark noticed first. He was trimming the hedge when a moving van rumbled past, trailing dust and chatter. The couple stepping out of the small car looked familiar in a way that tugged at something buried. Mid-30s, excited, curious. Evelyn joined him on the porch. "They look like we did," she said quietly. Mark nodded. "Yeah." They watched as the new couple wandered the street later that day, greeting neighbors, pointing toward the trees, the tea shop, the iron fence at the end of the road, and finally, to number 9. That evening, as the sky dipped into gold, Mark and Evelyn walked to the square for groceries. The new couple was there, sitting outside the cafe, sipping tea and asking questions. They stopped Evelyn with a wave. "Hey," the woman said brightly. "You're locals, right?" Evelyn smiled. "We've been here a while." The man leaned forward. "What's the deal with that house at the end of the lane? The one with the red door?" Mark and Evelyn paused. Then Mark chuckled, just the right amount of amusement. "Oh, that?" "Yeah," the man said. "Looks abandoned. Creepy, kinda." Evelyn shrugged. "It's just part of the village." Mark nodded. "Been there forever. Nothing to worry about. People say no one goes near it." "They're right," Evelyn said, standing straighter. "Best to just ignore it." The couple exchanged a look, and just like that, the moment passed. That night, Mark and Evelyn sat on their porch, watching the breeze carry the scent of lavender through the air. "We did the right thing," Evelyn said, more to herself than him. Mark didn't answer immediately. He looked down the lane. The door was still there, closed, red, still. "It's always been there," he said, and he meant it.